Author Suzanne Mattaboni is this episode's guest. She recently released the second edition of her novel, Once in a Lifetime. Suzanne, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So here we have a coming-of-age story set in the mid-1980s. The main character is Jessica, an ambitious, new wave-influenced art student from Long Island. She's dying to kickstart her career. She's saving to get overseas to London. The excitement of the post-punk era is coming to a head there. To save for the trip, her and her roommates take jobs in a progressive restaurant town on the Delaware River, where they deal with a lot of different things: waitressing chaos, mystics, punk clubs, drag queens, mosh pits, and other assorted tribulations, in an effort for her to find out what real life beyond the college classroom is like. So tell us about this character, Jessica.
She kind of sees a world out there happening as far as this exciting new scene that's going on. She wants to be a part of it. It's influencing design and art and what everyone's listening to, what they're wearing. It has an effect on so many things around her. And she kind of feels like it's all going on without her. And she wants that to come to a stop so she can kickstart her career, become a multimedia artist and find fame and fortune and be part of this scene that she feels is kind of just beyond her reach. So she wants to go overseas to London, where all the new wave, the real cool post-punk stuff is going on. So she wants to go to an art program there that's a little too expensive for her. So in order to do that, her friend set her up with a waitressing job in a cool kind of progressive town on the Delaware River. And in the midst of trying to scrape up that money through, waitressing jobs, they meet a lot of, interesting people and go do some, punk club trolling. And she gets into kind of the middle of a new relationship that she has to kind of balance against a relationship that she had put on the back burner for a while so that she could pursue some of these new, career goals and such. So,
And the original came out in 2022. Is there anything different
yes.
in this book than the first one?
Well,
Or
there is the foreword by Annie Zaleski, who is a terrific journalist. I'm so excited that she got involved in this whole process. So she has worked with Rolling Stone, and she's written essays for intros at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And she was able to do a foreword and said some interesting things about both the book and the time period and the music scene. Uh,
beautifully written,
yeah,
yeah.
no, she's terrific.
Yeah.
I'm, like I said, really happy to get her involved. In addition, I have a collection of short stories that's coming out, and one of those stories is included as a bonus in the and in addition to that, there's an author Q&A. So some
Okay.
extra
Okay.
material.
What inspired you to write the book initially?
Well, the book sort of started with some experiences that I wanted to relay that had happened to me when I was a young person. I wanted to kind of bottle this exciting time frame where this scene was kind of busting out, and young people were really taking ownership of it because we knew that something really different was happening and that we were driving it, and that was powerful. That was very empowering at the time. But as sometimes happens with fiction, you start with certain situations and characters and people and characteristics that and then they run off and do their own thing in the book and create arcs and become fictional and do things that you never expected them to do. And that's that's a good scenario when you when you get the characters to kind of build their own lives. So
Yeah, and speaking of that, Annie Zaleski wrote the foreword, as you say, and she highlights a quote from the book that's really stood out to her, and it stood out to me as well. It's, quote, "I want it all. Isn't that what they told us we could have? We're the women of the 80s. We can have it all. No one mentioned what would happen if we got it." Can you expand on that quote, how it relates to the main character in the book and her journey through this story?
sure, absolutely. This is actually a big thing in the book because young women of this time frame realized that their mothers really maybe didn't have the option to go to college. It was frowned upon, or they were had less choices. But here we are now, and we can go to college. We can have education, we can have careers, we can have friendships, we can have relationships and sex and adventures and do whatever we want. We can have it all. That was kind of a big thing in the 80s. They said, well, you can have it all. But I don't know if anybody can really have it all. So this is a moment in a young woman's life where she had to realize what kind of choices and sacrifices she would have to make in order to get all the things that she wants. And maybe even with all that, butt up against things that were obstacles and realize that maybe no one can have it all, at least not all at once. You have to maybe earn a little bit of this now, get a little bit of something else later, and just continue with your life and realize the reality of your circumstances, which, women are still butting up against today.
Yeah, right, right. And he also points out how the music of the 80s provided emotional solace and unstoppable dance grooves, but also served as a blueprint on how to march to the beat of a different drummer and stay focused on a future you define on your own terms. At the end of the book, you thank a lot of specific musicians and artists, most, if not all, I love. How important was the music and the artists of the 80s to you in terms of the book, the storyline? Was there specific reasons behind what you chose for song titles
Oh,
and
absolutely.
artists?
Absolutely. Well, a lot of the framing of the book with those song titles was due to the fact that these young women um, were so devoted to the scene. They communicated in song lyrics. They talked to each other in song lyrics. They kind of felt like this was their own language that really no one else was privy to, but them. And that was a challenge for me to weave into the book without. You really can't quote song lyrics or anybody else's writing. You can quote titles. That's why the titles are used in that way. But what you find as a writer then is that you can't, it would be so much easier to cheat and use somebody else's brilliant lyrics. But if you can, you have to evoke that same feeling yourself with your own language. So there are a lot of little Easter eggs in there that um, sort of point to lyrics or use them in a kind of an offhand and incorrect way. But if you know that song, you know what they're talking about. But that's kind of tipping a hat to the fact that this defined that the music defined how these girls lived and who they hung around with and what clubs they went to and what shoes they wore, what boots they wore and what clothes they dressed up in, and it just had so much influence over what everybody did. It's how you identified each other.
And we were talking prior to recording. I made an observation that maybe it's true, maybe it isn't, but there was the chapter where, well, the chapters itself, each chapter contains stories that provide the month, the year, location, while also including the title of a song that fits in with what you're about to read. And chapter 3 is Almost June 1984, the Sandler Apartments. Girls just want to have fun. This is when she's moving into the apartments, cardboard boxes everywhere. And but the objective is really, let's check out the new club down the street, New Hope's nightlife. What's it all about? And but at so the 80s, decade of excess, having fun, yeah, but Jess and her friends are aware of the dangers out there. They're cautious about the guys they meet. They're protective of each other. There's a strength to these girls. They're smart. So it reminded me of Girls Just Want to Have Fun, Cyndi Lauper, how she wanted to have fun, but she was tough. You wouldn't mess with her, like WWF. She stood up to Captain Lou Albano and Roddy Piper. So I wondered if there was some kind of correlation there, if that was a specific choice.
Well, it was in a lot of on a lot of levels. These girls are strong. I'm glad that that comes through. I had we had a discussion where in trying to publish the book, I gotten feedback almost that the girls were too strong from the get go, that there wasn't enough of an arc, which upset me because my question was, well, do you want strong women in your books or you want wimpy girls who then maybe find some strength in the end? Because I didn't like that idea. And I,
Yeah, you told me that too
yeah,
before we recorded. I mean, that's a challenge that I think every author has to face when the publishers make decisions that they're not falling in line with what your vision is for the story.
right, right. And I thought that was a kind of sad way to present, literature to people. So, I
Right.
stuck with my guns. But in fact, these girls are described as intimidating, even in different in different parts of the book. They do. have a certain strength, and they are very um, supportive and protective of each other. They are not perfect. They butt heads. Their loyalty to each other is questions at moments, but they are called upon to rescue each other at points, and they do that. And as far as girls just want to have fun, it's also the fact that we had a lot of fun as young people supporting each other, and even just, it was just as much fun to go through our closets and decide what we wanted to wear, and get ready for the party as it was to actually go to the party. Sometimes we had just as much fun being together and dancing around the room, you know, trying on each other's clothes and, searching,
Oh, those 80s
yeah, in the
outfits.
closet, and yeah, rearranging, each other's outfits and such. So, it was fun.
I ju- well, I just saw a clip of Cyndi Lauper just recently at one of her concerts singing. The girls just want to have fun, and she still dresses outrageously. She had like polka dot dress, and I
Good
mean, she
for
is the best.
her.
I love Cyndi Lauper, man. Author Suzanne Mattaboni is this episode's guest. She wrote the second edition of her novel Once in a Lifetime. So Jess has two men in her life. I mentioned this earlier. Her boyfriend from high school, Drew. He's an astrophysics major and Led Zeppelin fan who is more Andy Kaufman than Andy Taylor. More, this is great. More
Sorry.
David Lee Roth than David Bowie. That's great. And then there is,
Okay.
is it Wit?
Yeah.
That's his name, right? Wit, the
Yeah.
guitarist in a new wave band. And there are some serious fireworks when Jess meets Wit. Talk about their relationship and that storyline in the book.
Well, she is quite impressed with the fact that he is so into the music scene that his band is actually going somewhere, because they had opened up for, a larger band that she actually went to see. It's a band called Killing Joke, which is kind of what we called hardcore at the time. Uh, so
That was a
she's,
real band.
yeah,
Oh yeah, yeah. Because
yeah.
Killing Joke, I think Nirvana's "Come as You Are." That riff comes from a Killing Joke song, if I'm not mistaken.
Really? Yeah,
Yeah.
they were kind of harsh, but fun, but some danceable stuff. And in any case, so his fictitious band, let's say, opens up for them at a club in Philly, and she meets him before realizing that, and is, really kind of shocked out of her little boots. So, so that's fun. And like I said, she relates to him on a very creative level, and relates to the fact that he's been able to enter this world that she's been envious of. He's a little older than her, and obviously, a little further along in his own creative career. So she envies that. She wants to be near that. She has a lot of fun with him. He just kind of never stops, moving and talking and expounding on, what makes him creative and where his inspiration comes from. So they commiserate a lot on that. But I think she also finds he's a little reckless. He's a little, maybe pulls her places where she's not quite as comfortable as she usually is. So, one thing about her as an artist, she's a mosaic glass artist. So really, she takes things, smashes them up into pieces, and puts them back together again in the way that she wants them to be. And she acknowledges that this is what she does with things. She takes things as they exist and kind of puts them through the strainer of her brain, and they come out different. And as she goes through this relationship with Wit, she starts to realize that she's sort of doing the same thing with guys, where she has these two relationships and she's comparing them, and she wishes that she could pare down each of them and sort of meld them together and make the perfect relationship. And that's really not fair. And I think in the end, the characters in the book are flawed. They are not perfect people, and that's a little more realistic, I think, than some of the things that are out there on paper right now. But I think she has to face up to her own flaws too, and the things that she's finding will disappoint her in life. And
Yeah,
it's
she's
not
finding out about herself. She's still young.
right.
Yeah, she's 19 years old, maybe 19, 20.
Yeah, she's 20.
Yeah,
She turns 20 actually in the at the beginning of the book. She finds that some of the things that she's disappointed with are not necessarily people. It's that she's just disappointed in the fact that she can't have that level of control and influence over the world. She has to accept some things
yeah.
and step back.
How did Jess's friends feel about Wit?
I think they were all pretty taken by him also, because they all wanted to be part of that world. And I think by the end, as they started to acknowledge that recklessness also, things got a little scary. I don't want to go too into too much detail because if anybody does want to read it, I don't want to spoil anything. But they do end up toward the end of the book going to a Pretenders concert, which asking someone to a Pretenders concert might as well be like a new wave marriage proposal. So so this is a real serious thing, but it does turn into somewhat of a dangerous event, and things kind of spiral.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and we mentioned this earlier, but for Jess and women of that of time in the '80s, they may not have older people that they could turn to for life advice. Like, how does she process all of this and try to navigate through these challenges? No, she can't call mom and say, "What did you do when you were a kid?" Because they grew up during a different time, right?
it's true. And this particular character, Jessica, does not have. She lives with her grandparents, so she lost her mother and she's out of touch with her father. So she didn't have that, even if she really wanted it. And back at the time period, yeah, we weren't so connected to, and I don't mean emotionally. I mean, I was very close to my parents, but I did not talk to them. I didn't get texts on a regular basis. We didn't have that level of communication. The infrastructure for that just didn't exist. So our friends sort of were our family, and I think that's what you see in this book. It's not just about the guys. It's about female friendships and them supporting each other no matter what. And they're flawed also, and they butt heads, and they get into trouble, and question each other's loyalty at moments. But in the end, they come to each other's rescue big time. So that's part of what the book is about. And she has to decide where her loyalties are there also, and she kind of finds out.
Yeah, and meanwhile, we see Jess. She's in control for the most part of the relationship with Whit. Early on, he's starting to wonder how she feels and where he fits in her life. He gets frustrated and he says, "Am I still just a piece of your jigsaw puzzle?"
Mm,
With that
yeah,
control comes difficulty for her, however, because I don't get the feeling she's enjoying this. It's not like she's trying to mess with his head. She's legitimately torn emotionally, and it's not just her career that Whit is up against. She still has feelings for Drew. So here
hmm,
lies the answer to the question, I suppose, is this what happens when a woman of the '80s has it all, right? I mean,
yeah,
this is it.
exactly, exactly. Well, a young woman of the '80s who's trying to figure out so many of the elements in her life. And that's what she was referring to as that jigsaw puzzle. Like, I have a few pieces. Like, she kind of looks at herself like this unfinished mosaic where there are things that are going to be filled in, and she doesn't know what the final picture is going to look like. And she maybe makes a few analogies about that throughout the book. And it's a very, and even the lyrics of Once in a Lifetime, I feel like that you are always wondering, where am I going to end up? How did I get here? How am I going to get where I need to be going? Uh, and in wondering that throughout the whole book, I think it throws the people around her off, especially Wit, and it maybe Drew also, but to a certain extent, one or the other of them are able to resolve that better than the other.
Well,
Let's say.
Whit is not a saint either, right?
No,
She
he has his own, but not. No one's maliciously. No one maliciously missteps in the book.
Yeah, yeah, they're just
But they do
kids trying
misstep.
to find their
Right,
way.
right,
Yeah,
exactly. But
exactly.
they do misstep, confuse each other, hurt each other, and try as best as they can to make up for it.
But
So
this I think also applies today for everybody, male, female. Is it possible to have it all at the same time, or is there
yeah,
always a
it's
price to
hard.
pay? I mean, there's always a sacrifice to make. You can't. There's only so much time in the day. You have to make some sacrifices, and you find a lot of musicians, actors who are on the road a lot. There is a price that they pay for it, and then later in life they
Absolutely,
realize, I don't know, maybe should I have done that shit? But life, that's what life is all about, making choices, right?
it's true. It's true. And no matter what choice you make, you look back and wonder what would have happened if you did the other thing. So
Well, that's what
But
I wonder is would the character Jess do anything different if you were to ask her in 2024 about her life back then?
hmm, I don't know. She might idealistically think that well, the way I look at it is that if you could go back and do it again, you would do it differently. But we don't get an again, you only get the one time. So if you have to prioritize, you pick the one that you really had to, make number one in your life. So, if it were if I could magically just continue to live my life over again, would I have made different choices? Well, yeah, because it would be fun to be able to discover those other things.
Yep.
But I wouldn't put those other things over the choices that I made. I made them for a reason, and I think a lot of people find that out, and I think you see a lot of that in fiction also. People go back, when they get this magical second chance and things just sort of revert to the choices that they made and they reconfirm that maybe they weren't so stupid after all.
Once in a lifetime. It's out now. You can find it wherever books are sold. And where can people find you online, Suzanne?
I am at SuzanneMattaboni.com. So if you note the spelling of the name, you can find it. There's
Yeah,
also
I'll
a
put a
once,
link. We'll put
yeah.
a link in the show notes so people can find
Okay,
it.
terrific. There's also a once in a lifetime novel.com site if you want to find out about the book itself. And yeah, it's out there on Amazon. It's on Kindle Unlimited at the moment. It's on Barnes and Noble. It's at various places. So
That's great. Suzanne, thank you. This was great.
it's great to be here. Yeah, great to get to discuss some of the ways that, pretty much the ways that new wave music kind of affected people at the time, because that was something I really wanted to share with people who hadn't experienced it.